In this episode of B.Hooked Knitting, we're going to learn how to pick up and knit on stockinette stitch. Now, this is a particularly useful technique if you're going to be knitting garments or any time you need to knit stitches where there were previously no stitches to knit. For the supplies list and written instructions, you can visit knitting.bhookedcrochet.com, and I will link to this particular post in the video description below. Well, let's go ahead and see how it's done. Last week we learned how to pick up and knit on garter stitch. Well, this week we're going to focus in on the stockinette stitch. So you'll need to have some type of little swatch or something that you're working on, or if you're working on a pattern, that will work too. What we're going to cover here is working along the side edge and then working along the cast on edge, which is actually the same for the bind off edge as well. The technique is the same. So let's first talk about the side edge. Now what you'll want to do is roll your work so that you can see the V's on the side. So what I like to do is just sort of exaggerate it a bit. Roll it all the way so you can see the back, and then turn it just so you can see each of the V's. Now the V's don't look as clean and as nice as they do for the bind off, but you get the picture here. So you'll want to insert your needle into both legs of the V as far up as you can go, so as close to the edge that you're working with. You'll grab your new ball of yarn or your new color, and you'll just simply give yourself some slack, so a few inches, fold it in half, place that on your needle, and then just pull it through the stitch. Now what I'm going to do on the back end is I'm going to secure this tail. So, if you want to tie it off, you can. The main idea is you want to keep some tension on there so you don't pull it through. So you'll locate the next V. So I'm going to point that out, is right here. I'm going to work my needle under both legs of that V, wrap the yarn, and pull it through. Then the next thing we'll do is locate the next V. So I'm just rotating my work up a little bit. I can see the V right here. I'm going to insert my needle under both legs of the V. I'm still steadying that tail on the back side of the work. Probably just do that for one more stitch. We'll yarn over and pull that through. Now when we're picking up and knitting along the side of the work, we have to accommodate for the size difference in the stitches because they're going to be facing two different directions. So knit stitches are typically wider than they are tall. So the general formula that we use is we will pick up and knit 3 and then we'll skip 1 stitch. Now if your pattern specifies something different, if it calls for something else, you definitely want to follow that pattern, but if it doesn't specify, this is a pretty good rule of thumb. So I'm just going to skip the next stitch and then work this into the next. And I'll just follow this pattern until I get to the end. Now, depending on the number of rows you're working with and the multiple, you may come to a situation where you're at the end where I have 3 stitches, I need to skip one and work in the next, but since there's only 1 stitch left, I definitely want to make sure I place my needle in the last stitch. You want to work as close to the edges as you can. So that's all you would do to pick up and knit along the side of stockinette stitch. I'm going to go ahead and work up another row just so you can get the idea of what it looks like after you have knit a couple of rows. Now typically your pattern might say to continue working in stockinette stitch if that's the pattern that the garment or whatever it is that you're working on is going with. And in that case, you would just continue to do so. Honestly, you can pick up whatever stitch pattern, it doesn't matter. This is just the technique to pick up loops on your needle. So what I've done here is I have knit up a couple rows in stockinette stitch, and I want to just bring a couple things to your attention. We picked up stitches on the right side of the work. That's very important because you will see a little seam on the back side. So keeping that in mind, after you've picked up your stitches along the right side of the work, the first row that you're going to knit is going to be on the wrong side of the work. So I knit a row of purl stitches. And then I flipped it over and worked a row of knit stitches. So from there, then your pattern would remain for the stockinette stitch. Okay, so now let's see how you would pick up a knit along the cast on edge. So what I've done here is just the long tail cast on, but this method will work with any cast on that you use. You'll take your scrap yarn, your new color, and fold it in half again, and you'll find your first stitch that's along the edge. Now again, we're going to be focusing in on the V's. So what I've caught here is both legs of the V of the very first stitch that's in my little swatch. I'm just going to place the new yarn around my needle and pull it through. Now again, I'm going to hold on to this tail in the back just so I have control of it. And I'm going to locate the next V. So I'm just going to turn my work. I can see the next V right here. I'll insert my needle under both legs of the V, yarn over, and pull through. Now the same rules that we used for picking up and knitting along the side doesn't really apply when you're working vertically. So whenever you pick up a knit on the cast on edge or the bind off edge, you can do one stitch for one stitch. So we can insert our needle into every V and pick up a stitch everywhere we have a stitch. And I'll also point out that we're doing this on the right side of the work, and that's important because there will be a little seam on the back. And the technique is pretty much the same. We're just inserting our needle into the stitch, wrapping the yarn, and pulling through. And nice clean seams or joins really come with practice. So I would really recommend, if this is a completely new concept to you, that maybe you don't start with the project that you're working on right now. Maybe you knit up a couple of swatches and just practice doing this, because I saw just a huge difference in myself from the first time I tried this to, after having some experience. The joins were so much cleaner. So we're just working along until we get to the edge here. I want to make sure I get my needle as close to that end as possible. And that's it. That's pick up and knit along the cast on edge. Now if you were working this along the bind off edge, the rules would be exactly the same. You would insert your needle into every single stitch, pick up a stitch for every single V that you see.